millionaire disrespects, pregnant wife. But her transformation, that night, shocks him. From the outside, Michael Rutherford had it all money power, a luxurious mansion perched on the hills of Malibu, and a beautiful wife carrying his unborn child. Yet behind the gilded gates and polished marble floors, his disregard for Alyssa's feelings knew no bounds. He belittled her hopes, sneered at her concerns, and took her love for granted. Little did he know, destiny was about to strike back. In a single shattering night, everything would change for both of them forever, sparking a transformation in Alyssa he never believed possible. The woman he looked down on would become his greatest revelation, and his harsh karma would rock him to the core. In the sprawling, sun-washed expanse of Southern California's coastline, the Rutherford mansion stood out like a gleaming monument to excess. Massive gates bearing the monogram R opened onto a driveway, lined with manicured palm trees and pristine flower beds, meticulously maintained by a small army of gardeners. Michael Rutherford, at just 34, was already a tycoon of epic proportions, lauded for his genius in tech startups and real estate. On the surface, he was the quintessential self-made man, shrewd, strategic, and ruthlessly efficient. At the heart of that estate, hidden behind floor-to-ceiling windows and the hush of silent corridors, lived Alyssa Rutherford. She was 7 months pregnant with her first child, Michael's child, and felt more alone than she ever had in her life. Alyssa was 28, a former interior designer who had dropped her bustling career at her husband's insistence. The notion of a pregnant wife running around on job sites, inhaling paint fumes, as Michael put it, was an embarrassment he would not abide. So she had obediently set aside her passions and retreated to the fortress of his mansion. From the day she moved in, Alyssa was made to feel like her new home was a gilded cage. The staff was impeccably trained, rarely speaking, unless spoken to. If Alyssa tried to be friendly, they would politely smile, but never linger in conversation. It was Michael's unspoken decree that his wife should always be served and never fraternize with the help. He believed it compromised the natural order of things. Alyssa found this notion absurd and stifling, but she had hoped love could thrive despite the differences. Though their early romance had been marked by a spark of genuine affection, as Michael's empire grew, he changed. His ambition overshadowed everything, including the respect and tenderness a husband should offer. Even Alyssa's pregnancy announcement, which she had delivered with trembling excitement, was met with a clipped nod and a swift phone call to his financial advisor to adjust his estate plans. The emotional gravity of bringing life into the world barely registered to him, and so Alyssa spent her days drifting from the private library, where she tried to reignite her passion for art and design by reading European architecture journals to the solarium, where she meticulously tended to a small array of succulents. The plants at least seemed grateful for her presence. She secretly cherished any form of life that responded to nurturing. Michael, on the other hand, came and went like a thunderstorm. His presence was often announced by the roar of one of his sports cars in the driveway. Rarely did he come home to spend quality time with Alyssa. Mostly he was ensconced in his study behind locked doors, negotiating deals over the phone or finalizing mergers in hushed but tense Zoom calls. Whenever Alyssa mustered the courage to ask about his day or share a fleeting moment of connection, his responses were clipped and distant, as though he was constantly in the middle of some grand chess game whose pieces only he knew how to move. One evening, after a particularly isolating day, Alyssa found the courage to slip into his study. She tapped on the door with timid knuckles. Michael was seated at an enormous mahogany desk, glare from the overhead halogen lights shining on his laptop. A glass of top-shelf whiskey sweated silently next to him. Yes, His voice was an irritated command. "May I come in?" Alyssa's voice trembled even though she tried to keep it steady. He barely glanced up. "Fine, make it quick." She entered her hand, drifting protectively over her rounded belly. "Michael, I'm worried about the baby," she started softly. "I've read that stress can be harmful and, well, I feel anxious all the time here. I was wondering if we might." A sardonic smile twisted across his lips. He turned away from the screen, at last his sharp gaze landing on her. "Might what see?" "Dr. Clara Mitchell," she said, naming a respected obstetrician who specialized in high-risk pregnancies. "She's been recommended. I just want to make sure everything's okay with our child." Michael set his elbows on the desk, fingertips pressed together like a predator preparing to pounce. "Is there any reason to think something is wrong? Are you experiencing complications?" "No, but then stop overreacting," he cut her off, grabbing his whiskey. "I already hired the best obstetrician. Money can buy Dr. Redwood, and if there's an emergency, we'll use him. We don't need your obsession with every new specialist in LE. It's a waste of time." Her heart sank, but she tried once more. "Michael, it's not just the baby. I'm lonely. You're always busy, and the staff can barely speak without breaking protocol. Would it be possible to spend more time together? Maybe a night out, or—" Michael's exasperation flared. He downed his whiskey in one gulp. "Alyssa, I'm building an empire. Do you know how many people depend on me? My time is not to be squandered on frivolous nights out. You have everything you need here. Food, comfort, security. Stop acting like a child." Tears welled in her eyes. She recognized that tone all too well, the voice of a man who saw her purely as an asset or an accessory, not as an equal partner. Sighing, she turned to leave. But before she closed the door behind her, she glanced back. "You're not the man I fell in love with," she whispered, her voice quavering. His response was a blank stare, as though her words were nothing more than static on a broken radio. In that moment, Alyssa felt a small spark of something new inside her. A determination, a realization that she couldn't let her spirit be crushed within these walls. A vow to reclaim her strength, if not for her own sake, then for the child she carried. Alyssa found a small semblance of solace in the greenhouse tucked behind the mansion. It was originally built by Michael's late mother, Linda Rutherford, who had loved exotic plants and horticulture. But after her passing, the greenhouse was left largely neglected. Alyssa discovered it during one of her lonely wanderings, and felt an instant connection to the space. Tending to plants, sprinkling water, pruning leaves gave her an odd sense of purpose that had been missing since her world was confined to the mansion. She decided to keep this place her little secret, a private refuge where she could daydream about the life she wanted for herself and her unborn child, a life filled with love, laughter, creativity, and reciprocity. She'd sit on a stool for hours, flipping through her old design sketches, thinking of ways to make the greenhouse more vibrant, more welcoming. She fantasized about building a new nursery that was bright and filled with color, a place her child could explore with wonderment. In these stolen hours, she also found an unexpected friend, Ana Cabrera, one of the gardeners who was responsible for the estate's outer grounds. Ana was in her late 50s, with sun-kissed skin and gentle eyes. Unlike most of the staff, Ana didn't scurry away when Alyssa said hello. Their initial conversations were brief, small talk about rose bushes or the best fertilizers. But over time, Alyssa felt safe enough to share snippets of her loneliness with Ana. One afternoon, as Alyssa snipped away at a hanging vine, Ana approached her with a warm smile. "Mrs. Rutherford, have you considered adding some orchids here?" She pointed to a shaded corner. They do well in that indirect light. Alyssa returned the smile. I'd love that. Orchids are beautiful, but a bit high maintenance. Reminds me of how I used to be with my projects, always fussing over every detail. Anna's gaze softened. I used to hear you were an interior designer. Is that true? Alyssa nodded. Yes, before the marriage. And the pregnancy. Why'd you stop? Anna asked, her tone careful. Alyssa exhaled slowly. Michael didn't think it was proper. Thought I should be home preparing for motherhood instead. She paused, searching for the right words. I love being pregnant, but I also loved my work. Lately I've been wondering if I gave up too much of myself. Anna placed a comforting hand on Alyssa's shoulder. It's never too late to hold on to who you are. Alyssa felt tears sting her eyes, but she quickly brushed them away. Thank you, Anna. I wish I'd met more people like you. Anna chuckled softly. Well, if you ever need someone to talk to, I'm around. It was a fragile bond, but one Alyssa clung to, like a life raft. She started sharing more about how Michael's coldness seemed to grow in proportion to his bank account, how the house felt less like a home and more like a prison. Anna listened without judgment, occasionally offering kind words or practical advice. She also told Alyssa stories about her own family, her late husband, who had been a gentle soul, and her children who lived in San Diego. Over time, these greenhouse conversations planted seeds of doubt in Alyssa's mind about the path she was on. Could she continue to endure a marriage where she was neither respected nor appreciated? Could this environment be healthy for her baby? She knew the questions needed answers, yet she still clung to the hope that Michael would change, that a piece of the man she'd once loved was buried beneath layers of cynicism and ambition. Michael Rutherford's business empire was not without its fault lines. A major real estate venture in downtown LA was hitting snags, rising construction costs, delayed permits, and an increasingly vocal group of community activists who opposed his projects. The situation rattled Michael's nerves. He spent hours locked in his study, jaw clenched, as he barked orders at project managers and lawyers. One day, after a particularly tense conference call, he marched into the living room with an ominous expression. Alyssa was reading quietly on the couch, trying to distract herself with an architecture magazine. She could tell from the set of his shoulders that something was off. I've got a public relations nightmare on my hands, he snapped, pacing the floor with restless energy. Some local activist named Sarah Nguyen is rallying press coverage about my development. She claims we're displacing long-term residents with our luxury condos. Alyssa lowered her magazine. Are you displacing them? I mean. Michael scowled. The city gave us the permits. The rest is not my problem. An uncomfortable silence filled the room. Alyssa felt a flicker of empathy for those affected communities, but knew better than to voice it aloud. Michael's philanthropic gestures were always for show, carefully orchestrated press events to curry favor with local leaders. The real Michael had little regard for how his actions affected others. Sensing her reservations, he threw up his hands. Don't start with your moral compass talk, Alyssa. This is big business. It's survival of the fittest. If I don't swoop in, some other developer will. That's how the world works. She set her magazine aside. I'm not judging, just try to see it from their point of view. People lose their homes, their neighborhoods. Maybe there's a more empathetic way to approach it, Michael waved her off. Spare me. If we want to keep this family in the lifestyle we're accustomed to, you need to understand that none of this is personal. It's business. It was in that moment that Alyssa realized how different her values were from Michael's. He always prided himself on being a realist, but she saw more cynicism than realism. Yet she felt powerless. He controlled the finances, the staff, even her social calendar. In her pregnant state, she was reliant on his resources for medical care and stability. However, it wouldn't be long before life and fate intervened in ways neither of them could predict. As Alyssa entered her third trimester, her anxieties about the baby intensified. She had been secretly seeing Dr. Clara Mitchell on the side, paying for appointments in cash so Michael wouldn't find out. Anna the gardener had helped arrange discreet transportation with one of her relatives who owned a local taxi service. Alyssa could trust Dr. Mitchell's care and felt more at ease discussing her emotional well-being. "She's growing perfectly," Dr. Mitchell said during one appointment showing Alyssa the ultrasound. "But stress can be harmful for both mother and child." "You need support at home," Alyssa forced a smile. "I know, I'm trying." That night, Michael was out late at a business function, an upscale gala for high-level investors. Typically, he would have demanded Alyssa's presence on his arm for appearance's sake, but he said her advanced pregnancy might distract from the event's focus. Alyssa took it as a thinly veiled insult, but also felt relief that she didn't have to endure another evening of smiling politely while Michael boasted about his latest deals. Around midnight, Alyssa was jolted awake by a gripping pain in her abdomen. At first, she told herself it was just a muscle cramp, a normal part of pregnancy. But soon the pain intensified, radiating through her lower back. She tried to stand only to crumple to the floor. Panic surged through her as she realized her phone was on the nightstand, too far to reach in this moment of weakness. Clutching her stomach, she somehow managed to crawl to the bed, pulling herself up to grab the phone. Her immediate thought was to call 911, but she decided she should first call the household staff for help. The staff quarters were on the other side of the mansion, but the phone line there was rarely used this late at night. After 4 rings, someone finally answered. "This is Alyssa," she gasped, sweat beading on her forehead. "I'm having severe pain. Please help." Before the staff member could respond, the line went dead. Alyssa's phone displayed a no-signal error, an inexplicable glitch in the mansion's private network. Panic rose in her throat. She had to get to the hospital. She tried to dial 911, but the call wouldn't go through. She panted, each wave of pain threatening to buckle her. Finally, she forced herself to stand, bracing against the wall. Step by trembling step, she made her way down the hall, calling out for help, in a voice strained by agony. Her pleas echoed against the marble floors and expensive art pieces. Eventually, a night guard named Raoul heard her cries and sprinted to her aid. "Mrs. Rutherford, I'll call an ambulance," he shouted, whipping out his own phone. Alyssa sagged against the wall, eyes fluttering as she waited for the paramedics. Fear and pain blurred her vision. All she could think about was the baby, whether something was terribly wrong. She murmured prayers under her breath, calling upon any higher power that would listen. When the ambulance arrived, 2 paramedics, one named James Redwood, ironically the same last name as the obstetrician Michael had insisted on, helped lift her onto a gurney. The siren wailed as they sped toward the nearest hospital. Alyssa's contractions felt like knives, each one sharper than the last. She heard snatches of the paramedics' conversation. Possible preterm labor. Need to check for complications. Only one thought looped through her mind. Where is Michael? Michael, drunk on fine scotch and high on the applause of his investors, finally checked his phone around 2 a.m. He cursed under his breath when he saw 4 missed calls from the mansion's landline, followed by a frantic voicemail from Raoul, explaining that Alyssa had been rushed to the hospital. His hands trembled as he pocketed his phone and dashed out of the venue. One of his associates, Carter Wilton, tried to stop him. "Michael, the Q&A session starts soon. You can't just Get someone else to handle it, Michael snapped. I have an emergency. He drove to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center at breakneck speed, weaving through the sparse late-night traffic. His mind raced with conflicting emotions, annoyance that this had happened at such a critical time in his business, fear for Alyssa's well-being, and a strange cocktail of guilt and regret. By the time he arrived, the fluorescent hospital lights seemed too bright, stinging his eyes as he rushed to the maternity ward. A nurse directed him to a private room. He found Alyssa lying in bed, pale and exhausted, a tangle of IV lines and monitoring equipment around her. Dr. Mitchell, whom Alyssa had been secretly seeing, stood at her side, conferring with another physician. Michael froze in the doorway. Seeing Alyssa so vulnerable shattered a piece of his armored facade. She looked up, her eyes brimming with pain and relief. "Michael, you came," she whispered. He strode in, ignoring Dr. Mitchell's sharp glance. "Are you okay? What happened?" Dr. Mitchell cleared her throat. "Your wife experienced preterm labor. It appears to have been triggered by excessive stress and possibly dehydration. We managed to stop the contractions for now, but she'll need careful monitoring." Michael, still breathing heavily from his rushed arrival, turned his glare on Dr. Mitchell. "Who are you? You're not Dr. Redwood." Alyssa squeezed Michael's hand weakly. "I sought a second opinion." Before Michael could retort, the beeping monitors drew the group's attention. The baby's heart rate had dropped momentarily, then climbed again. Dr. Mitchell quickly adjusted the settings. "We have to keep her calm. She's nearly 8 weeks premature. It's critical we maintain a stable environment." Michael was uncharacteristically quiet. He sank into a nearby chair, loosening his tie. He looked at Alyssa, truly looked at her for the first time in months. The lines of worry on her forehead, the tear tracks on her cheeks. Her hair was matted to her forehead with sweat. It dawned on him that the person carrying his child could have died if the situation had been worse. The weight of that possibility pressed on him like a granite slab. His phone vibrated incessantly in his jacket pocket, likely more business updates, more urgent requests. He ignored it. For a moment, it was as if the rest of the world ceased to matter. His empire, his reputation, his deals all overshadowed by the fragile life in this hospital bed. Alyssa turned her head away, a single tear escaping down her cheek. "I was so scared," she murmured, "and you weren't there." Michael felt something twist in his chest, something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a long time, remorse. He reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice cracking. "I didn't know." She gave a soft, humorless laugh. "You never want to know, Michael." He lowered his gaze. Perhaps she was right. Perhaps he had deliberately blinded himself to her struggles. Something inside him shattered. He took her hand more gently this time, realizing for the first time that Alyssa was not just a figure in his life's equation. She was a human being he had promised to cherish. Alyssa spent several days in the hospital under observation. Dr. Mitchell advised bed rest for the remainder of her pregnancy, cautioning that any spike in stress could trigger early labor again. Michael, sobered by the scare, instructed his staff to rearrange the mansion to accommodate Alyssa's every comfort. He had her bedroom moved to the lower floor so she wouldn't have to climb stairs, hired an in-home nurse, and converted one of the sitting rooms into a mini medical suite with advanced fetal monitoring equipment. Yet for Alyssa, the physical changes in her environment weren't enough. She sensed a shift in Michael's demeanor. His voice was softer when he spoke to her. His gaze lingered longer. He even cancelled several business trips and high-profile meetings to work from home. But was this genuine concern, or merely a reaction to the crisis? During those weeks, Michael tried to make small talk appearing at her bedside, with fresh flowers or updates about the baby's monitoring results. Initially, Alyssa responded with guarded politeness. She was grateful for the attention, but also acutely aware that Michael's track record of empathy was almost non-existent. She couldn't help wondering how long this concern would last, or if it was just a show to assuage his guilt. One afternoon, as Alyssa lay propped on pillows reading a parenting book, Michael entered with a tray of hot tea. His attempts at domestic tasks were so rare that Alyssa almost thought he'd delegated it to someone else, and then carried it in himself. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, setting the tray down on a side table. She shrugged. "Sure." He took a seat and cleared his throat. "I asked Dr. Mitchell about the best ways to support you. She mentioned reducing stress. So I've put a hold on the heavy construction in the mansion and banned late-night events here." Alyssa nodded non-committally. "Thank you." Michael hesitated, fiddling with the handle of his teacup. "Look, I know I haven't been attentive. I've been too focused on business. But seeing you in the hospital, it forced me to rethink some things." She looked at him, searching his eyes for sincerity. They seemed less steely, more clouded with uncertainty. "I appreciate your effort, but it'll take more than a few changes around the house." He swallowed, the muscles in his neck tightening. "I know. I want to try. If you'll let me." Despite her lingering doubts, Alyssa felt a cautious flicker of hope. For the sake of her child, for the sake of the life they were about to bring into the world, she decided to give him a chance, albeit warily. A few days later, as Alyssa dozed in a recliner, she heard the door to her makeshift bedroom open. Glancing up, she saw Michael. This time he didn't bring tea or flowers, but a stack of papers. He appeared pensive. "Are those business documents?" she asked wearily. He shook his head. "No, it's some background info on charities working to help people displaced by luxury developments. I've been reading up on them." Alyssa arched an eyebrow. "Really?" He exhaled, sitting on the edge of her bed. "I'm not saying I'll stop my developments, but maybe there's a way to do it more responsibly. Create affordable housing units, job programs. I've been thinking about a potential partnership with a philanthropic foundation." She studied him, heart pounding. This was entirely out of character. "Why the sudden change of heart?" Michael shrugged, looking down at the papers. "In the hospital, I realized something. I spend all my time chasing money, but for what? If I'd lost you and the baby that night, no amount of money could fix that." A tear slipped from Alyssa's eye, and she quickly wiped it away. She placed her hand on his, feeling the tension in his fingers. "I hope you follow through. Not just for public relations, but because you mean it." He nodded silently, swallowing hard. In that fragile moment, Alyssa caught a glimpse of the young man she'd fallen in love with years ago, a man who had been charming, ambitious, yes, but also caring in ways she hadn't seen in a long while. She remembered how he used to look at her, as though she was his entire world, how he'd talk about building a legacy together, not just a fortune. They sat there for a time, letting the silence speak volumes. In those quiet beats, something shifted between them, not a complete transformation, but the start of a different narrative. While Michael worked diligently to make the mansion more comfortable, a spectre from his past reappeared: Veronica Barnes, his former business partner and ex-girlfriend before Alyssa. She had parted ways with Michael after a bitter split, claiming half the shares of a tech startup they co-founded. But rumor had it, she was back in town sniffing around for new ventures. One afternoon, a sleek black car pulled up to the gate and the staff buzzed Michael in his home office. Veronica had arrived unannounced, Warily, Michael ordered the gates to open. He met her in the foyer, which still shimmered with opulence, marble floors, a massive chandelier, and gilded mirrors. Veronica, stylish and sharp-featured, glanced around with a smirk. Still living in a museum, I see. Michael stuffed his hands into his pockets. What do you want, Veronica? She produced a manila folder. I'm working on a new investment deal, and it might benefit you. I heard about your headaches in downtown LA with the activists. My new venture focuses on green building initiatives. You partner with us, and maybe you solve your PR problem. Michael's jaw tightened. I'm exploring philanthropic angles already. Why would I partner with you? She shrugged. Oh, just old times' sake. Plus, I'd get a cut. You'd get a better public image. Her eyes glinted. Heard your wife's pregnant. Congratulations. His face hardened. Don't involve Alyssa in this. Veronica let out a short, cold laugh. Don't worry, she's not my concern. I'm here strictly to talk business. If you're interested, call me. She thrust the folder into his hand and turned to leave her high heels echoing in the grand hall. Michael felt a chill ripple through him. Veronica was not one to cross lightly. He also worried about how her arrival might disrupt the fragile peace he was trying to build with Alyssa. That evening, as he joined Alyssa for dinner in her room, she was allowed to sit up for short periods. He wrestled with whether or not to tell her about Veronica. In the past, he would have concealed it to avoid unnecessary drama, but something within him urged honesty this time. A former partner of mine showed up today, he said, slowly stirring his soup. Alyssa looked at him curiously. A business partner? He nodded. And ex, Veronica Barnes. She wants me to invest in some green building initiative that might help my PR. I told her I'd think about it. But I wanted you to know. Alyssa studied him, waiting. Okay, thank you for telling me. Michael met her gaze. I'm not interested in her personally. This is strictly business. Alyssa offered a small smile. I appreciate the transparency. I just hope you'll make decisions that align with the values we've been talking about. He reached for her hand. I will. In that moment, a subtle chord of trust was restruck, though the melodies of doubt and fear still lingered beneath. Veronica's proposition gnawed at Michael. On one hand, partnering with her would give him immediate credibility in the eyes of environmentally conscious investors, possibly neutralizing the activist outcry. On the other hand, forging alliances with an ex who had once sued him seemed like playing with fire. One afternoon, after consulting with lawyers, he found himself driving to a modest office building in downtown LA. The building housed the Community Outreach Center, where Sarah Nguyen, the activist leading the protest, held her meetings. He'd set up an appointment to discuss a potential compromise affordable housing units within his luxury project's job training programs for local residents and increased green spaces. Michael entered the office feeling out of place in his tailored suit. Posters of local heroes and civil rights icons covered the walls. A group of volunteers scuttled by, arms full of flyers. At the reception desk, a young man in a worn T-shirt looked at Michael suspiciously before directing him to a back room. Sarah Nguyen greeted him with a firm handshake. She was in her early 30s, energetic and sharp-witted. Mr. Rutherford, I'm surprised you came in person. I'd rather talk face-to-face, he replied. I realize our relationship has been adversarial. Sarah gave a thin smile. That's one way to put it. So what's on your mind? Michael cleared his throat, pulling out a folder of proposals. I want to see if we can find common ground. I'm prepared to allocate a significant percentage of my developments for affordable units. I'm also looking at ways to incorporate green building techniques. Sarah's eyes flicked over the documents. Who wrote these up, my legal team, under my guidance? Michael said, choosing his words carefully. "And you're really willing to do all this?" she asked, doubt palpable in her tone. He met her gaze. "I've recently realized that wealth without conscience isn't worth much. My wife's health scare, she nearly went into preterm labor, forced me to reflect on the kind of legacy I want to leave. I want to make sure my child grows up in a world where responsibility matters." Sarah studied him, arms folded. "Words are easy. Action is harder." Michael nodded. "I know. But I want to start somewhere." She considered the documents for another minute. "Fine. We'll organize a community meeting. You'll present these proposals publicly, and if the residents and activists support it, we'll move forward. But no shortcuts. I'll be watching you." Michael actually felt a hint of relief. He knew this was just the beginning, but at least it was a step in a new direction. One that surprisingly felt more meaningful than any high-profile merger he'd ever closed. Meanwhile, Alyssa, confined to bed rest, used her time to rediscover her passion for design. With a laptop propped on her lap, she sketched concepts for a more welcoming home environment and for philanthropic ventures that supported maternal wellness. She imagined safe, comfortable shelters for at-risk pregnant women, filled with the nurturing spirit that she often lacked in her own marriage. One evening, as Michael sat at her bedside reviewing his notes, she flipped her laptop around. "Take a look at this," she said, showing him a digital mock-up of a community center designed to help expecting mothers. Michael raised an eyebrow. "This is interesting." "It's more than interesting," Alyssa corrected, a light in her eyes. "It could be revolutionary, a place where pregnant women can get free medical checkups, psychological support, and postpartum care. Funding could come from philanthropic grants or corporate sponsorships." Michael whistled softly. He recognized the passion in her expression. "You really want to build this?" She nodded. "Yes. And I think we can leverage your business connections to make it happen. Let me handle the design and outreach. I know Dr. Clara Mitchell would support it." Michael looked at her pride mingling with awe. "Let's do it," he said, quietly. Alyssa gave a tentative smile, surprised by his quick agreement. "Really, yes," he affirmed, placing his hand over hers. "I'm trying to change. Maybe this is exactly the sort of project we need." In that moment, Alyssa felt a surge of energy and validation she hadn't experienced in months. She was more than a wife, more than a decorative piece in Michael's life. She was a creator, an innovator. And though she was cautious about trusting Michael's newfound willingness, a renewed sense of partnership flickered to life between them. Days passed in relative calm, with Alyssa making steady progress on her community center project, and Michael finalizing his compromise with the downtown community. However, just as the couple began to find a fragile harmony, an unexpected event shook their lives again. One late afternoon, Alyssa's in-home nurse noticed that the fetal monitor registered sudden fluctuations in the baby's heart rate. Alarmed, she tried to reach Michael, who was in a meeting off-site with potential investors. He didn't pick up immediately. She then called Dr. Mitchell, who advised bringing Alyssa to the hospital immediately. Panicking, Alyssa struggled to breathe normally as she was once again strapped onto a gurney. "Please let Michael know," she told the nurse. Her mind spun with worry. Had the stress of all these changes caught up to her again? At the hospital, Dr. Mitchell examined Alyssa carefully. "It seems the baby's shifted into a breech position. We need to monitor for possible cord compression. If it becomes too risky, we might have to deliver early." Alyssa's heart pounded. "But she's only 8 months. Isn't that dangerous?" "There's some risk," Dr. Mitchell replied. "But at this stage, most babies do fine with proper neonatal support." Michael burst into the room, breathless. "I'm here," he announced, rushing to Alyssa's side. "How bad is it?" Dr. Mitchell explained the situation again. Alyssa, looking up at Michael, read the anguish in his eyes. She grasped his hand tightly. "No matter what happens, just be here," she whispered. "I'm not going anywhere," he promised, bending down to kiss her forehead. For the next 12 hours they waited under vigilant medical care. Each minute felt like a small eternity. In the early hours of the morning, the baby's vitals stabilized, and Alyssa was spared an emergency C-section, at least for now. Dr. Mitchell decided to keep her in the hospital for observation until the baby's position improved or delivery became inevitable. This trial by fire further bonded Alyssa and Michael. He remained at her bedside, refusing to leave, even when his phone erupted with urgent business calls. Alyssa felt a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, he was learning what it meant to truly love someone beyond himself. In the wake of Alyssa's hospitalization, Michael cleared his schedule indefinitely to be with her. Veronica Barnes, sensing an opening, decided to make her move. She approached Michael's board of directors, pitching her green building initiative in a way that undermined Michael's new philanthropic direction. She framed it as a more economically viable approach, casting doubt on Michael's community-driven proposals as too idealistic and unprofitable. Rumors swirled that Veronica was rallying a faction of board members to challenge Michael's leadership. They claimed he'd become soft ever since his wife's pregnancy scare, and that his philanthropic gestures threatened their bottom line. When Michael learned of this, he was livid. He convened an emergency board meeting at the hospital, though he refused to leave Alyssa's side. So, in an unprecedented move, the conference took place in a private room adjacent to Alyssa's complete, with a long table and teleconferencing equipment. Alyssa, barely able to stand from her bed, overheard muffled arguments through the door. She caught snippets, profit margins, new alliances, stock prices. She heard Michael's raised voice. "I'm still the majority shareholder, not turning my back on my responsibilities." After an hour, Michael emerged, his face set in grim determination. He sank into a chair by Alyssa's bed, scrubbing a hand over his face. "They're worried about my sudden shift in priorities. Veronica's stirring the pot." Alyssa felt a twinge of anxiety. "What are you going to do?" He looked at her with unwavering resolve. "Fight. I built this empire, and I'm not letting them sabotage it, or my commitment to you and the baby. They can take me to court if they want. I'll win, and if I don't, I'll walk away with what's mine. I'll start anew." The finality in his voice stunned Alyssa. This was a man who for years had defined himself by his achievements and wealth. Now he sounded prepared to risk it all for someone more important. As fate would have it, the stress of the boardroom showdown triggered Alyssa's labor. Late that same night, she felt the all-too-familiar pains of contractions intensifying and spaced closer together. Dr. Mitchell confirmed that the baby was on her way, breech position be damned. "We'll try to rotate her," Dr. Mitchell told Alyssa. "But if that fails, a C-section might be our safest bet." Michael stood by, pale and anxious, as nurses wheeled Alyssa into the delivery room. The harsh overhead lights and the beeping monitors created an air of urgency. Alyssa, sweating and trembling, gripped Michael's hand so hard he thought his bones might crack. "Focus on your breathing," he encouraged, whispering words of support in her ear. The medical team attempted a procedure to turn the baby. Alyssa groaned in pain, tears streaming down her face. Michael's own eyes glistened. He pressed his forehead against hers, murmuring encouragement, as if his voice alone could will the baby into a safer position. After several grueling attempts, Dr. Mitchell shook her head. "We're going for an emergency C-section. It's the best course for both mother and child." A flurry of activity followed. Anesthesiologists, surgical drapes, lights adjusted for the operating table. Alyssa felt the cold numbness creep up her spine. Michael stood next to her, dressed in sterile scrubs, his hand trembling atop hers. She looked into his eyes, both of them understanding the gravity of this moment. "No matter what, I'm glad you're here," she whispered. His throat tightened. He bent to kiss her forehead. "I'm not leaving you." Not ever. In a flurry of careful, practiced movements, Dr. Mitchell performed the C-section. Alyssa braced herself, numb but conscious tears mingling with sweat. Then came a sharp cry. It echoed through the sterile room like a herald of new beginnings. The baby was lifted into the world, a tiny, wriggling figure with a powerful set of lungs. Michael gasped, tears openly streaming down his face now. "It's a girl," Dr. Mitchell announced, beaming. A beautiful, healthy girl. A wave of indescribable emotion crashed over Alyssa. She reached out, and the nurse brought the swaddled infant close so Alyssa could kiss the baby's damp forehead. Michael looked on awe-stricken, as though witnessing a miracle. In that moment, nothing else mattered. The mansion, the business empire, the money, the feuds, everything paled in comparison to the raw beauty of their daughter's first cries. In the days following the birth, the Rutherford family's focus narrowed to the tiny, swaddled infant named Amelia. Alyssa, exhausted and recovering, cried tears of joy and relief each time she held her daughter. Michael, who once scoffed at parental leave, now refused to leave the hospital, sleeping in the recliner in Alyssa's room and changing Amelia's diapers with clumsy determination. The shift in Michael's priorities rippled through his life. Investors clamored for him to return to work, but he waved them off. Even the board's attempts to strong-arm him into ditching his philanthropic commitments fell on deaf ears. "This is my daughter," he told them in a video call, while gently rocking Amelia in his arms. "I'm not missing a moment of this. My attorneys and CFO can handle the interim." Alyssa watched from her hospital bed, heart swelling. The shift wasn't just about fatherhood. It felt like a genuine transformation. She recalled the day they'd married her hopes, her naive faith in love. Now, through trials and heartbreak, something real and enduring had emerged. "I want you to see something," Michael said one afternoon, opening his laptop. He navigated to a series of documents. "I've arranged for a trust fund for Amelia, of course. But that's not all. I'm reallocating a portion of the business profits to community-focused initiatives, like the one you envisioned for pregnant women. We can't do it all at once, but I want to start." Alyssa stared, speechless. This was the same man who once dismissed social responsibility as a frivolous expense. Now he was championing it. She reached out and touched his arm. "Thank you. It means more to me than I can say." He managed a small smile. "I owe you everything. I'm just grateful I realized it before it was too late. But life rarely offers redemption without testing its authenticity." A week after Amelia's birth, news broke that a financial audit of Michael's company had uncovered irregularities in one of the subsidiary acquisitions. Rumors hinted at fraud or embezzlement. The stock plummeted overnight. "It's that old deal with Brantley Holdings," Michael said grimly, reading through a deluge of emails on his phone. "I trusted a partner who turned out to be dirty. Now the feds are investigating." Alyssa's heart sank. "What does this mean for you?" Michael rubbed his temple. "It means I could lose everything if they think I was complicit." Even though he'd distanced himself from the shady subsidiary, the scandal threatened to undo all the goodwill he'd been building. Investors panicked, pulling out. The board, spooked by potential indictments, threatened to remove him as CEO unless he could prove his innocence swiftly. Veronica Barnes was quick to exploit this crisis offering to buy out parts of his business at a fraction of their value. "You can't possibly handle a federal investigation and remain profitable, she argued in a public statement. I'm stepping in to save what I can. Michael, battered by exhaustion and the emotional toll of new fatherhood, found himself in an existential crisis. On top of everything, the hospital bills, the philanthropic commitments, and the day-to-day costs of running a massive company loomed large. For all his wealth, he was on the brink of a financial meltdown. In this crucible moment, he showed Alyssa the entirety of their financial situation. We might have to sell the mansion, he said, shame tugging at his voice. Liquidate assets to cover legal fees and potential fines. Alyssa stared at him for a long moment, then simply shook her head. Fine. If it means protecting our family's future and your integrity, then so be it. It's just a house, Michael. Amelia and I need you. Oh, not marble floors. Her words stunned him, cutting through his pride like a knife through silk. He realized that the woman he had once belittled was now his rock, the one person who stood by him unconditionally. Over the next several weeks, Michael's legal team fought to clear his name. He cooperated fully with federal investigators, providing documents and testimony that showed he had been duped by unscrupulous partners at Brantley Holdings. It was a draining process every day, laced with uncertainty. Meanwhile, Alyssa, still recovering from the C-section, poured her energy into caring for Amelia and supporting Michael. She often stayed up late with the baby so he could attend early morning legal briefings. She prepared statements for the press about the philanthropic projects they still intended to pursue, refusing to let the scandal derail her vision. Gradually, the truth came out. Michael was not personally liable for the fraud. Key figures in the subsidiary were indicted, and Michael was cleared of wrongdoing. Though his personal fortune had taken a substantial hit, he sold off various assets and parted ways with some top executives. He remained in control of his core businesses. For perhaps the first time in his life, Michael felt more gratitude than pride at the outcome. He returned to the hospital's postpartum suite, where Alyssa and Amelia waited relief, evident in his features. It's over, he murmured, pressing his forehead to Alyssa's. We might not be as wealthy as before, but we're free. Alyssa kissed his cheek softly, tears in her eyes. That's all that matters. The rest will figure itself out. He looked at Amelia, who was sleeping peacefully in a cradle by the window. The morning sunlight cast a halo around her tiny form. In that moment, Michael felt a depth of love and humility he had never known. He had faced the brink of losing everything: his wife, his child, his fortune, and emerged with a crystal-clear understanding of what truly mattered. With Michael's legal troubles resolved, the couple decided to sell the sprawling mansion in Malibu. It represented too many painful memories of isolation and arrogance. Instead, they purchased a more modest home in a family-friendly neighborhood near the city, a place where Alyssa could walk Amelia in a stroller without navigating security gates or suspicious guards. On moving day, Alyssa took a final stroll through the greenhouse, her cherished refuge, and plucked a single cutting from her favorite orchid. She placed it gently in a small pot, determined to nurture it in their new home as a symbol of resilience and new beginnings. Anna Cabrera, the gardener who had once offered Alyssa a listening ear, tearfully said goodbye. "I'll miss you, Mrs. Rutherford," she said, giving Alyssa a warm hug. "Come visit us any time," Alyssa replied, meaning every word. As they drove away from the mansion for the last time, Michael reached for Alyssa's hand. "I'm sorry for how I treated you here," he said, voice thick with emotion. "I was blinded by ambition." Alyssa squeezed his hand. "We can't change the past, but we can shape the future." He nodded, eyes forward. "I like the sound of that." In their new home, Alyssa and Michael embarked on building their philanthropic dream. The community center for expecting mothers named the Linda and Clara Foundation, in honor of Michael's late mother and Alyssa's trusted obstetrician, began construction with funds donated from Michael's remaining businesses and partnerships. Zara Nguyen joined as a consultant, ensuring that the center's programs were inclusive and community-driven. Though Michael's net worth was drastically reduced, he found a richer sense of purpose. He poured himself into learning about sustainable building, about maternal health challenges in underserved communities, and about forging authentic relationships with the people his developments affected. Meanwhile, Alyssa thrived, balancing motherhood with her passion for design. Her blueprint for the center included welcoming colors, natural light, and spaces for group therapy and art therapy. Dr. Clara Mitchell helped secure medical equipment donations. Volunteers streamed in, eager to contribute to a cause that promised real impact. The Rutherford name, once synonymous with cutthroat capitalism, was evolving. Media outlets that previously criticized Michael's business dealings now ran stories about the philanthropic pivot. Some remained skeptical, calling it a rebranding strategy, but others saw genuine transformation in the interviews Michael and Alyssa gave, particularly when they spoke about Amelia and the near tragedies that had forced them to reevaluate their lives. In the quiet nights of their new home, after Amelia was tucked into her crib, Michael and Alyssa would sit on their modest porch, hand in hand, watching the stars. They talked about the future Amelia's schooling, the possibility of more children, the expansion of the foundation. Each conversation was infused with the kind of gentle respect and mutual understanding that had once been missing. 3 months later, in a modest ribbon-cutting ceremony, the Linda and Clara Foundation opened its doors. Alyssa, holding Amelia, smiled through tears as she cut the bright red ribbon. Michael stood by her side, holding a large check to cover the center's operational costs for the first year. Dr. Mitchell beamed proudly, and Sarah Nguyen gave a rousing speech about community empowerment. The event was attended by local families, medical professionals, and even a few former critics who wanted to see firsthand whether Michael Rutherford's transformation was real. As cameras flashed, he felt no need to grandstand or boast. His satisfaction came from seeing pregnant women enter a space filled with warmth, support, and understanding, something he had once denied his own wife. In a poignant moment, a young pregnant woman approached Alyssa, tears in her eyes. "Thank you for creating this place," she said quietly. "I was so scared. I don't have much money, and the father—" He left. "But seeing this, it gives me hope." Alyssa gently placed a hand on the woman's shoulder. "You'll never be alone here. We'll make sure you and your baby get the care you need." Watching from a few feet away, Michael felt a lump in his throat. This was the real meaning of fortune, the ability to uplift others, not just yourself. Later that evening, as they returned home, Michael received a phone call. It was from his attorney announcing that the last vestiges of the fraud investigation were finally resolved. He was free of any legal entanglements. He shared the news with Alyssa, who breathed a sigh of relief. "So it's truly over," he nodded. "Yes, and I'm ready for whatever comes next." Leaning against him, Alyssa felt the rise and fall of his chest. For the first time in a long while, she felt safe. This man, who once treated her like an accessory, had finally recognized her value and his own humanity in the process. Months turned into a year, and Amelia took her first wobbly steps in the living room of their cozy home. Michael cheered her on, clapping loudly, while Alyssa recorded the moment on her phone with a beaming smile. The once ruthless millionaire now found the simplest joys immeasurably rewarding: a babbling toddler, a happy wife, a project that actually helped people rather than just lining his pockets. His hair showed a few more strands of silver, a subtle sign of the stress and transformation he had endured. yet his eyes were warmer and his laughter more genuine. Alyssa, too, seemed more radiant, her creativity thriving, her confidence blossoming. She even took on some freelance design projects again, a sign of independence Michael no longer stood in the way of, but proudly supported. One night, after putting Amelia to bed, Michael and Alyssa found themselves reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. The heartbreak, the betrayal of trust, the near disasters, the brush with losing everything. Each piece of adversity had chiseled away their illusions and forced them to confront what truly mattered. Sometimes I wonder if we had to go through all that, Alyssa murmured, resting her head on Michael's shoulder, just so we could become who we are now. He kissed the top of her head. I think we did. They sat in silence, letting the echoes of their past mistakes and triumphs linger in the background. Tomorrow they would wake up to a fresh day, perhaps filled with new challenges, definitely filled with new joys. But they would face it side by side with a respect for one another that money could never buy. In the end, Michael Rutherford learned the hardest lesson of all, that a fortune without love is hollow, that pride without compassion leads to ruin, and that true wealth lies in family empathy and second chances. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey of love, betrayal, and redemption. Michael's fall and Alyssa's strength remind us that even in life's darkest moments, there's hope for healing and second chances. If their story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe for more heartfelt stories that inspire change and resilience.